Are we on? Are we on? Are we filming? Good afternoon. It's Saturday afternoon. We've had a busy Saturday so far. We have been building, and Molly helped. I've got Molly with me today. Give us a Molly wave. There we go, Molly wave. We've been building Emily's new bunk bed. Well, I guess do you call it a bunk bed? So there's no sleeping underneath. It's a kind of like a space underneath and a desk and whatever.
And you can stand up and
it's really high, really high. Yeah, so it's a big old ladder. As with all these sort of things, it's kind of flat packed, so it's not been. There's been mistakes made along the way, but I'm pleased to say it's done. But it's
about the height of like the ceiling from here.
Yeah, no, I think it is. So I think she's going to get a little bit kind of giddy being that high. But she didn't even have a side on her bed before, did she? It always used to worry me, the fact that she could roll off. So I don't think she's going to roll off. She's got rails now.
Yeah.
But the next step is we need to get you one as well. Are you going to have the same thing?
Oh, well, I am going to have it, but I'm going to have... So, the colour will be black, and then it's like the black is a chalkboard.
Oh,
so
right.
Like,
Okay.
yeah,
I remember Mummy saying. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's exciting. We've got to try and find it, though, haven't we? Because it's not in stock at the moment.
Yeah, and a disc underneath my bed.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't think I was talking with Mummy about it. I think I'd rather wait until it's in stock rather than just pick something else. If you really want that, it won't take long to be in stock. So books today. It's picture books because it's Saturday. So we have got another one from the Rabbit and Hedgehog stories. We've had a couple so far. We've had a little bit of winter and the birthday presents. And today's one, I can't remember what it's called. It's called Rabbit's Wish. Rabbit's Wish. So we're having Rabbit's Wish from there. We're also having Betty and the Yeti by Ella Burfoot. Now, my brain tells me that we've done this book already, but Molly's brain says we haven't. And Molly's brain is far more reliable than mine. So I'm hoping that that's the case.
I've never even read this story, so I'm...
Did you hear a noise there?
Yeah, maybe it's the next door neighbours.
Yeah, it must be. Not that, no, it's going to give me a heck of a shock if something was in that. So yeah, Betty and the Yeti, and apologies if we have read it before. But it's a good book anyway, even it says some books are worthy of a second one. Last week we had The Squirrels Who Squabbled, and that was, it says, from the creators of The Lion Inside, and we said at the time we ought to read The Lion Inside. So here we go, Jim Field and Rachel Bright, so the same team again. We've had loads of Jim Field ones. He did all the Oi Frogs and Oi Dogs and Oi Platypus and all
if
that sort of stuff.
If we can find the koala who...
Oh, the koala who could? Yeah.
Then we'll
Then we'd have the whole set. And a classic book here by Julia Donaldson and Lydia Monks, by The Princess and the Wizard. Kind of glittery bits on each page. Another beautiful book. So we've got another set of lovely books. We've got another batch of lovely books tomorrow. I suppose we could always do the final Rabbit and Hedgehog tomorrow as well, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Any thoughts on order?
I'll say probably first Betty and the Yeti.
Betty and the Yeti.
Because I've never seen it before and I just want to...
We can have a quiz at home for what Daddy's what sweatshirt would Daddy's what do these called? I've completely lost my ability to speak. Daddy's hoodie. So what is this film referencing? Okay, that's your quiz question this week. So write in. You can write in on the YouTube link or on the Facebook link as to what the film reference is. So Betty and the Yeti by Ella Burfoot. Betty has a little sled that she takes wherever she goes. She pulls on the ropes and flies down the slopes, whether it freezes or snows. Betty finds things in the snow. When she goes out to play, she puts them gently on her sled and then goes on her way. One day she found a pair of gloves. She put them on her sled, and a jingly-jangly fluffy hat which she wore upon her head. and when she saw some snow boots as hairy as a bear, she tried them on her little feet and stamped from here to there. Then she found a woolly scarf all thick with twigs and leaves, and one enormous smelly coat that came right past her knees. "Do these clothes belong to you?" Betty asked the polar bear. "No," he said, and shook his head. "I don't need clothes to wear. I've got thick fur to keep me warm. I do not mean to gloat, but I've no need for hats or scarves and never wear a coat." "Do these clothes belong to you?" Betty asked a big blue whale. "No," Whale said, and shook her head and splashed her great big tail. "I've got blubber to keep me warm, a special kind of fat, though I do like the bells on that jingly-jangly hat." "Do these clothes belong to you?" Betty asked an Arctic hare. "No," he said, and shook his head. "Ask that rock over there." What a strange thing, thought Betty, peering at the rock. But I've asked a hare and a polar bear, so I can't see why not. "Hello, rock," said Betty. The rock did not reply. "Hello, rock," said Betty. The rock was very shy. But finally there came a voice that said to little Betty, "I'm not really a rock at all. I'm actually a yeti." "A yeti!" squealed Betty, and she tried to run away. But "Please don't go," the yeti cried. "I'd love it if you'd stay." "Yetis in the wild, you see, are rather shy and small. We have to wear a lot of clothes to keep us warm at all. My clothes are big and hairy. They give folks such a shock that I threw them all away and hid behind this rock. It's very hard to find a friend in the land of snow when you've scared them all away before you've even said hello." Betty didn't fret at all. She handed him his clothes. "You'd better put these on," she said, "before it really snows." And there he's putting them all back on. She took his muddy glove in her little mittened hand and talked with him and walked with him across the frozen land. Soon they met Betty's friends in the cold and snowy night, and the smelly hairy yeti, well, he gave them quite a fright. But when they saw that Betty had hold of Yeti's paw, they knew they didn't need to be frightened any more, and the hare spoke up quite bravely in a loud and cheerful voice. "I'd befriend a yeti, given half a choice." So Whale and Bear and Arctic Hare became the yeti's friends. The yeti kept his clothes on and was never cold again. Betty made a hat like his. She wore it every day, and when she went out on her sled, she jingled all the way. That feels a bit Christmassy, having a jingly noise. You won't often see a yeti in the land of ice and snow, because unless they've met you once or twice, they're still quite shy, you know. So says Betty. And you absolutely, well, you said you didn't even know that story. No. So you don't know? Well, we obviously haven't read it before. I don't know. Maybe I read it with Emily. Right. Shall we have the Princess and the Wizard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hold it. The Princess and the Wizard. Right. Nice glittery pages. It was Princess Eliza's birthday. She was just blowing out the 7 candles on her cake when a wicked wizard flew down the chimney and into the room. "Why didn't you invite me to your party?" he thundered. "Because wicked wizards like turning people to stone," replied Princess Eliza. "So they do," said the wizard, and with a flick of his bony finger, he turned the king, the queen, and all the party guests into stone. Then he laughed a horrible laugh, "Ha ha ha," and said to Princess Eliza, "They like capturing princesses too." Just then there was a whirring of wings, and in through the window flew the princess's fairy godmother. She was late for the party. When she saw what had happened, she waved her wand and said, "The princess may try 7 times to escape by changing her colour and changing her shape." The wizard just laughed his horrible laugh, "Ha ha ha," and said, "Changing her colour and changing her shape will never help Princess Eliza escape." Then he snapped his bony fingers again and turned the fairy godmother to, stone. Dearie me. That's a pretty dress. The wizard whisked the princess up the chimney and carried her away to his tall, dark castle. He locked her into the cellar, where she cried herself to sleep. The next day was Monday. The wizard unlocked the cellar door. He was holding the big red book which contained all his magic. "This is your first chance to escape," he said. "I shall count to 100 and then I shall come and find you." He opened his book, closed his eyes and began to count. Princess Eliza ran outside. The moat of the castle shone blue under the blue sky, and she jumped into the water and turned herself into a blue fish. 99, 90, 98, 99, 100. The wizard opened his eyes, looked in his magic book and read, "To find where Eliza is hiding from you, look in the moat for the fish that is blue." He fished Eliza out of the moat and took her to his kitchen, which was full of blue plates and pots and pans. They were all covered in dried up food. "So you like blue, do you?" he said. "Then set to work and wash." And he locked her in. On Tuesday morning, the wizard unlocked the kitchen door. He looked at the clean plates and pots and pans and he grunted. "Chance number 2, he said. Then he opened his book, closed his eyes and began to count. Princess Eliza ran to the farmyard. She turned herself into a yellow chick and hid in some straw. But the wizard read in his book, "The straw in the farmyard is yellow and thick. Princess Eliza is disguised as a chick." There she is. You can tell by her eyes. He scooped Eliza up and took her to a cupboard which was full of yellow socks. They all had holes in them made by his pointy toenails. "So you like yellow, do you?" he said. "Then set to work and darn." And he locked her in. On Wednesday morning, the wizard unlocked the cupboard door, looked at the darn socks and grunted. "Chance number 3, he said. And he opened his book, closed his eyes and began to count. Princess Eliza ran to the meadow. She changed herself into a green grasshopper and hid among the grass blades. But the wizard read in his book, "The grasshopper princess is easily seen, chirping away in the meadow so green." He caught Eliza in a net and took her to his green bathroom. The bath, basin, walls and floors were covered in the wizard's slimy toothpaste. "So you like green, do you?" he said. "Then set to work and wipe." And he locked her in. 3 more days went by. Each day the princess tried to escape. On Thursday she turned herself into an orange fox and hid in a pile of orange leaves. On Friday she turned herself into a purple butterfly and fluttered among some purple flowers. On Saturday she turned herself into a black cat and lurked in a black tunnel. But each time the wizard found her and gave her yet more work to do. On Sunday morning the wizard came up onto the roof where Eliza had been scrubbing the sooty chimney pots. Instead of grunting, he laughed his horrible laugh. "Ha ha ha! This is your last chance," he said. "If I catch you this time, you must stay and work with me for the rest of your life." Then he opened his book, closed his eyes, and began to count. Princess Eliza turned herself into a white gull and flew up into a cloud. But as she hovered above the roof where the wizard was still counting, she saw words forming on the page of his open book. "So that's how he finds me," she cried. "I shall never escape." Then she had an idea. She turned herself into a page of the wizard's book, a perfectly blank white page with no writing on it. 98, 99, 100. The wizard finished counting and began to read his book. The princess turned into the bird in the sky. She hid in a cloud, then she had one more try. That was the end of the page. The wizard turned over to read more, but there was no more. The next page in his book was blank and white. He flew into a rage. "You stupid book!" he shouted, and he hurled it into the moat. The book landed with a splash and sank to the bottom. All the wizard's magic was gone. At that moment in the palace, the king and queen and all the party guests came back to life. "Where's Princess Eliza?" they asked each other. Nobody knew except the fairy godmother, and she only smiled and said nothing, a bit like the ladybird. Princess Eliza had turned herself from a white page into a blue fish and was swimming to the edge of the moat. Then she turned herself into a yellow chick and ran across the corn in the farmyard. She turned herself into a green grasshopper and hopped over the grass. She turned herself into an orange fox and raced through the orange leaves. She turned herself into a purple butterfly and fluttered over the purple flowers. She turned herself into a black cat and streaked through the black tunnel, and then finally she turned herself into a white bird and flew all the way back to the palace and in through the window. She perched on a chair at the tea table and changed herself back into a princess. The king and queen and all the party guests hugged her. Then Princess Eliza cut her birthday cake and everyone had a slice. Hooray! Hooray, 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 hooray. Right. Rabbit and Hedgehog all lying inside.
Rabbit and Hedgehog.
Rabbit and Hedgehog. And I think it was called Rabbit's Wish, was it?
Yeah.
Rabbit's Wish. Rabbit's Wish. Love Rabbit and Hedgehog stories. Rabbit wants more than anything for Hedgehog to stay awake all day with him. Will his wish come true? Have we not had this one, have we?
No. Had the birthday presents and little bit of winter.
No, we haven't had this one. Yeah. Look at the sky, Hedgehog, said Rabbit. It's all beautiful and red. I like it better when it's twinkly and black, said Hedgehog. Besides, you know what they say about red skies. Remind me, said Rabbit. Red sky in the morning, shepherd's warning, said Hedgehog. Rain is on its way. Hedgehog yawned. Time for me to go to bed, he said. So soon, said Rabbit. Yes, Rabbit, said Hedgehog. You're a day creature and I'm a night creature. That is the way it is. Rabbit nodded sadly. Night, night, Hedgehog. I mean, day, day. As Hedgehog disappeared from view, Rabbit sighed a great big lonely sigh. I wish, he said, that just for once Hedgehog could stay up all day with me. With his friend gone, Rabbit did what he always did. He had breakfast, a little grass, a dandelion leaf, and suddenly, plop, a raindrop landed on his nose. Bother, said Rabbit. Hedgehog was right. Rain was on its way, and now it's here. As Rabbit hopped back to his burrow, the rain grew heavier and heavier. How wet it is, he said. Rabbit shook the water from his fur, wiped the mud from his paws and scampered underground. My burrow, said Rabbit happily. So warm, so cosy, so dry. He frowned. But it is also rather messy, he said. As it's raining outside, I'll stay inside and tidy up.
That's the bottle that...
That's the bottle that had
moonlight.
a bit of moonlight in it, that's it. Rabbit busied himself all morning. He swept the floor, he made his bed, he sorted through his treasures one by one. The ball, the string, the woolly thing, and most precious of all, the bottle of moonlight that Hedgehog had given him. Oh, Hedgehog, I do miss you, said Rabbit. Well remembered. Water! Rabbit cried. There's water in my burrow. The water was trickling down the tunnel and seeping up through the floor. It quickly soaked Rabbit's bed of straw and set his treasures bobbing. With the bottle of moonlight in one arm and the ball, the string and the woolly thing in the other, Rabbit hurried from his burrow. Oh, thank you. This guy's got high. Rabbit couldn't believe his eyes. The rain was heavier than ever, and the lake, it was higher than he'd seen it before, so high that Rabbit's little hill had been turned into an island. Far away on the other side of the lake, the tops of Hedgehog's bramble patch poked up above the swirling muddy water. Rabbit dropped his treasures. He ran this way and that. Hedgehog! He cried. Hedgehog, where are you? Here I am, said a little voice. Rabbit spun round. Hedgehog was standing down by the water's edge. Hedgehog! Cried Rabbit. Rabbit! Cried Hedgehog. I was so worried, said Rabbit. There was no need to be worried, said Hedgehog. I'm a good swimmer. When the water woke me, I was worried about you, so I swam across the lake to find you. Rabbit stared at his friend with wide open eyes. You're so brave, he said, but you mustn't catch cold. He put the woolly thing on Hedgehog's head. That doesn't look very comfortable. That looks a bit better. So what are we going to do now, Hedgehog, said Rabbit. My burrow is full of water and your bed is at the bottom of the lake and it's still raining. I know just what we can do, said Hedgehog. We can play. Yes, said Rabbit, we can play together in the rain. They played catch, they played tug of war, so they found a reason for the ball and the string and the woolly thing, and they played boats. The rain stopped, the sky cleared and the stars came out. Rabbit and Hedgehog sat down at the edge of the lake. Hedgehog, said Rabbit, I have a confession. What do you mean, said Hedgehog. I've something to tell you, said Rabbit. It was my fault that everything happened. I wish that you could stay up all day with me. He looked down sorrowfully, and my wish came true. I'm glad that it did, said Hedgehog. Maybe next time I will wish that you could stay up all night with me. I'd like that, said Rabbit. He yawned. But now it's time for me to go to bed. Night-night, Rabbit, said Hedgehog. Night-night, Hedgehog, said Rabbit. And then that leaves us one more to do, called What Do You Remember? You're very good at remembering things. You remembered about the bottle of moonlight there. And you remembered that we've not done Betty and the Yeti. You've got the best memory in all the family. Right, final one. As we say, Jim Field and Rachel Bright, The Lion Inside. We've had a few of theirs. None of those ones though. In a dry, dusty place where the sand sparkled gold, stood a mighty flat rock, all craggy and old. And under that rock, in a tiny full house, lived the littlest, quietest, meekest brown mouse. Already sounds a bit like the Gruffalo, this one.
Yeah.
He was so very tiny, so incredibly small that nobody noticed him, ever, at all. He got trod on and sat on and missed out for stuff, ignored and forgotten. Yes, mouse life was tough. Ooh, ouch. Meanwhile, far above, on top of the rock, times were quite different. It was Lion O'Clock. This huge, toothsome creature made sure everyone saw how important he was by how loud he could. I think I know what that word's going to be. Roar! He was head of the pack. He was shouty and tough. He loved showing the crowd he was made of strong stuff. Yes, all were impressed by this mighty king cat. If only, thought Mouse, I could be more like that. Then, late one dark night, in his Minnie Mouse bed, the cleverest thought popped into his head. He jumped from the covers and held up a paw. I've got it, he said. What I need is a roar. Roar. I mean, what if this mouse was the weeniest squeak, was a little more grrr and a little less meek? Well, he'd still be the smallest of fuzzy brown mice, but he'd make friends and join in, and life would be nice. Yes, thought the mouse, I must find out how. I will learn how to roar, and I will learn it now. But gulp, oh my gosh, there was only one beast who could teach him this thing, but might make him a feast. It was time to be strong, take a chance. After all, forever was such a long time to feel small. So he made himself brave, and he thought like a winner. He set off for the top, hoping not to be dinner. It felt like the scariest thing he could do. But if you want things to change, you first have to change you. The further he climbed, the closer he got to the slumbering lion reclining on top. Then at last, as he stood on his tippity toes, he found himself suddenly nose to nose. Gulp. Pardon me. Wake up, Mr. Lion, you've got company. Squeak, Mr. Lion, what I've come to you for is, Squeak, do you think you could teach me your roar? A silence befell that twinkling plain. Lion opened his eyes and puffed out his mane. Time slowed right down. Why, it felt like a week. Then he opened his mouth and let out an eek. Who knew he was afraid of mice? The lion was shaking, his paws all a fumble. He was backing away with a scrambling tumble. "Don't hurt me," he whimpered. "Oh, try to be nice." Well, my goodness, this lion was frightened of mice. "Don't worry," Mouse peeped. "I'm a friend, not a foe. Let's rock this together. We'll have fun, don't you know?" That was a magical moment for sure, when Mouse didn't feel at all small anymore. He had found his true voice and learned to speak out. And for that, you don't need to roar or to shout. And from that day and always, the two were a pair. They both liked that rock better, now that rock was to share. The mouse, while still little, felt big in his head. And Lion, he still roared, but with laughter instead. Yes, that day, they both learned that no matter your size, we all have a mouse and a lion inside. There, that's all of today's ones. Put that out because we might have another one tomorrow. But that's all our stories done for today, so we're back tomorrow. Just prior to this, we tried a sherbet fountain. I encouraged you to have a sherbet fountain. You weren't quite so sure, did you? Because I was saying you've got to put it in your mouth and give it a proper kind of bop, bop, bop. But so Daddy gets a full mouthful of sherbet. You were quite delicate because you're a little girl, and so you went. But then you did a bit of a cough and kind of managed to get sherbet absolutely everywhere. It got in a horrible mess, which is why I can't turn it round, because you've still got a little bit of sherbet on you. And a little bit on down here as well. So yeah, it was a big kind of sherbet explosion, because you kind of went coughed everywhere. So yeah, maybe sherbet fountains aren't for you, but Daddy does like a sherbet fountain. So we will say TTFN for now. We are back tomorrow with more stories. Can't remember any of them. Can you remember any of them?
Wait. Another Rabbit and Hedgehog.
Rabbit and Hedgehog. Is it the Night Box? Or
Yeah, the
like
Night
that?
Box and the Hug.
The Hug.
That's like 2-story. Like, well,
Oh yes, it's the
flip
one
it
where you
round,
flip it round and you have.
and then I have another story
That's got a tortoise.
and a hedgehog.
Tortoise. Yeah, that's not a whole tortoise. No, that's a
Tortoise
rabbit.
and
That's a rabbit and a hedgehog. Yeah, you're right. It's a tortoise
Yeah.
and a hedgehog. And one more Oliver Jeffers. Am I allowed to have that Oliver Jeff as well?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
moose.
The moose belongs to me, I think it's called.
Yeah.
So, answers on a postcard what film this relates to. I'm going to try Molly again with a sherbet fountain. And we'll say TTFN and see you back tomorrow. Okay, bye. You can do a wave? Bye.